The autumn wind whistled through the Colorado aspen grove, sending golden leaves spiraling to the forest floor. Mason Reed adjusted his worn leather gloves and squinted up at the canopy, where patches of blue sky peeked through the trembling yellow leaves. At 52, he had spent more than half his life in these woods, first with his father's logging company, and now as an independent contractor who specialized in sustainable forestry practices. Should be enough for today, he muttered to himself, securing his chainsaw in the bed of his faded blue Ford pickup. The Forest Service contract required selective harvesting in this section, and he'd marked the designated trees yesterday. Tomorrow he'd bring his nephew Jake to help with the cutting and hauling. Mason was about to climb into the driver's seat when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong among the rustling leaves and distant calls of ravens. He paused, head tilted, listening more carefully. There it was again, a muffled sob carried on the wind. Following the sound, Mason moved deeper into the grove, his heavy boots crunching on fallen leaves and twigs. The crying grew louder as he approached a small clearing where a massive fallen aspen had created a natural bench. Huddled against the trunk sat a girl, no more than 12 or 13, her dark hair falling forward to hide her face as her shoulders shook with quiet sobs. "Hey there," Mason called softly, stopping a respectful distance away. "You all right?" The girl's head snapped up, revealing tear-stained cheeks and red-rimmed eyes. She scrambled to her feet, looking ready to bolt. "It's okay," Mason said, raising his hand slightly. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name's Mason. I work in these woods." She hesitated, clutching a backpack to her chest like a shield. "I'm fine," she said, her voice cracking. "Just leave me alone." Mason noticed her school uniform, a plaid skirt and navy sweater from St. Catherine's, the private school in town. "You're a long way from school," he observed. "And it's getting late. Your folks must be worried sick." A fresh wave of tears welled in the girl's eyes. "No, they're not. They don't even notice when I'm there. So why would they care when I'm gone?" Mason frowned, recognizing the pain in her voice. He'd heard that tone before, in his own daughter's voice, years ago, before he'd gotten sober and worked to rebuild their relationship. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, gesturing to the fallen tree trunk. Without waiting for a response, he settled himself on the log, groaning slightly as his knee protested. "Been on my feet all day." The girl remained standing, watching him warily, but she didn't run. "I'm not going to make you go anywhere," Mason said. "But these woods get mighty cold after sunset, and the temperature's already dropping." He unzipped his thermos and poured steaming coffee into the cap. "You want to tell me your name?" After a long moment, she mumbled, "Olivia." "Nice to meet you, Olivia. Want some hot chocolate?" He reached into his lunch cooler and pulled out an unopened packet. "My granddaughter makes me pack extras. Says a man my age needs the calcium." A ghost of a smile flickered across Olivia's face before disappearing. "I don't want to go home," she said suddenly. "Everyone there hates me now." Mason nodded slowly, pouring hot water from his thermos into a spare cup. "That's a heavy feeling to carry around." He stirred the hot chocolate and offered it to her. "Want to tell me about it?" Hesitantly, Olivia sat down on the log, leaving several feet between them. She accepted the cup, wrapping her fingers around its warmth. "My mom got remarried last month," she began, her voice small. "Her new husband moved in with his 2 kids. They're twins, Sophie and Jackson. They're perfect at everything, and my mom—" Her voice caught. "My mom keeps saying how lucky I am to have siblings now, how I should learn from them. But they hate me, and they're turning her against me too." Mason listened as the story spilled out, how the twins sabotaged her at home while acting angelic in front of the parents, how her mother seemed blind to her struggles, how her new stepfather was strict and unforgiving of any perceived failings. "So I decided to run away," Olivia concluded, staring into her cup. "I just couldn't take another dinner listening to Sophie talk about her perfect grades and Jackson's soccer trophies, while my mom looks at me like I'm a disappointment." The wind picked up, sending another shower of golden leaves around them as the forest began to darken with approaching dusk. Mason watched as Olivia drained the last of her hot chocolate, her shoulders still hunched defensively. In the deepening shadows of the aspen grove, she looked impossibly small and vulnerable. He knew he needed to get her home, but first, he needed to earn her trust. "You know," he said carefully, "I used to think running away would solve my problems too." Olivia glanced up, skepticism written across her face. You're like ancient." Mason chuckled. "I'm 52, not 100. But yeah, even us ancient folks were kids once." He pulled his pocket knife from his jeans and began to whittle absently at a small branch. "When I was about your age, my dad was hard on me. Nothing I did was ever good enough. He wanted me to be just like him, tough, never showing feelings, working from sunrise to sunset." "What happened?" Olivia asked, her curiosity temporarily overriding her misery. "I packed a bag one night and made it about 5 miles before it started raining." Mason smiled at the memory. "I was soaked, hungry, and scared of the dark, but too stubborn to go back. Found an old hunting cabin and spent the night there, convinced I was going to live in the woods forever." "Did they come looking for you?" Mason nodded. "My mom did. Found me the next morning, shivering and hungry. Instead of dragging me home, though, she sat with me and really listened. First time anyone had done that." He paused his whittling. "That's when I learned something important. Running away doesn't solve the problem. Sometimes you need to stand your ground and make people see you, really see you." Olivia wrapped her arms around herself. "My mom doesn't see me anymore. All she sees is her new perfect family." Mason considered this. "What did your family call you before all this change happened?" Olivia's expression softened slightly. "My dad used to call me Liv, but he moved to Seattle after the divorce, and now he's always too busy to talk." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "My mom started calling me Olivia Marie when she got serious with Richard. Says Liv sounds too casual." "Sounds to me like you've lost more than just your nickname," Mason observed. "Feels like you're losing yourself." The girl nodded, fresh tears welling in her eyes. Mason stood up, tucking his knife away. "Come with me a minute. Want to show you something." Curious despite herself, Olivia followed as Mason led her to a nearby aspen, its white bark gleaming in the fading light. He ran his hand over the smooth surface. "You know what's special about aspens?" he asked. "They're all connected underground. What looks like a bunch of separate trees is actually one living organism. Each tree supports the others." He pulled out his knife again. "And they carry stories. People have been carving messages in aspen bark for hundreds of years." Mason carefully began to carve into the bark. His movements were deliberate and practiced, the blade making clean, precise cuts. "My grandfather taught me to respect the forest," he explained as he worked. "Said we should never carve into trees without good reason. But he also taught me that sometimes, when a person needs to be remembered, there's no better place than an aspen." When he stepped back, the letters LIV stood out clearly against the white bark. "There," Mason said softly. "No matter what anyone calls you at home, this tree knows who you really are." Olivia reached out, touching the carved letters with trembling fingers. "Won't it hurt the tree? Aspens are survivors. The carving will scar over, but the name will remain." Mason pocketed his knife. "Just like people. We get hurt, we scar, but we survive, especially when we remember who we really are." For the first time since he'd found her, Olivia's expression opened up, vulnerability and gratitude replacing defensive anger. "Thank you," she whispered. "Now," Mason said gently, "I think it's time we figured out how to get you home. Not because running away was wrong, but because you're stronger than you think. Strong enough to stand your ground and remind everyone who you really are." Olivia stared at the carving for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Okay, but I don't know how to make them listen." "I might have some ideas about that," Mason said, guiding her back toward the clearing where they'd first met. "But first, I need to make a call so your folks know you're safe. Then we can talk strategy." As they walked, Mason noticed how Olivia kept looking back at the carved tree, as if drawing strength from those 3 simple letters glowing white against the darkening forest. The interior of Mason's truck was warm and smelled of pine, leather, and coffee. Olivia sat rigidly in the passenger seat, her backpack clutched in her lap as they wound down the mountain road toward town. After calling her mother, a tense, brief conversation during which Mason had identified himself and assured her that Olivia was safe, they'd agreed to meet at the Bridger Creek Diner on the edge of town. She sounded really mad, Olivia said, breaking the silence that had fallen between them. Mason nodded, probably scared more than anything. Fear does funny things to people, makes them act angry when what they really are is terrified. I've never done anything like this before, she admitted. I've always been the good one, the quiet one. Sometimes the quiet ones have the most important things to say, Mason replied, slowing as they approached a curve. The trick is finding the right way to say it. Olivia stared out the window at the darkening landscape. I don't know how. Whenever I try to tell Mom about the twins, she thinks I'm just jealous or making things up. Mason considered this as he navigated the winding road. You know, when I was getting sober, that's another story for another time. I learned something important about communication. When people are defensive, they can't hear you. So sometimes, you have to start with I feel, instead of you did. Olivia turned to look at him. What do you mean? Instead of saying Sophie and Jackson are mean to me and you never notice, try I feel invisible when I try to tell you about my problems. Mason shrugged. Doesn't sound like much of a difference, but it is. One sounds like an accusation, the other like an invitation to understand. The lights of town came into view below them, a constellation of yellow and white against the darkening valley. Olivia's fingers nervously twisted the strap of her backpack. What if it doesn't work? What if nothing changes? Mason slowed the truck as they approached the town limits. Then you find allies. Your dad in Seattle, a school counselor, another relative. You keep speaking your truth until someone hears you. He glanced at her. And remember, you can always come talk to me. I'm at Miller's Hardware most mornings for coffee before heading to the woods. The Bridger Creek Diner's neon sign cast a blue glow over the parking lot. Mason could see a woman pacing beside an SUV, her face tight with worry. Beside her stood a tall man with his arms crossed. That's them, Olivia whispered, shrinking into her seat. Mason parked the truck and turned to face her. Remember what I told you. Stand your ground. Speak your truth. And remember who you are, Liv. The girl took a deep breath and nodded. As they approached, Olivia's mother rushed forward, her expression cycling rapidly between relief, anger, and concern. Olivia Marie, do you have any idea how worried we've been? The school called when you didn't show up for afternoon classes, and then... Jennifer, Mason interrupted gently, extending his hand. I'm Mason Reed. We spoke on the phone. The stepfather moved forward, his posture stiff. Richard Conroy, where exactly did you find my stepdaughter, Mr. Reed? In the whispering Aspen Grove, about 6 miles up Forest Service Road 22. Mason answered calmly. I was finishing up some contracted work when I heard her. Jennifer pulled Olivia into a tight hug, then held her at arm's length to inspect her. What were you thinking? You could have been hurt, or lost, or... I think, Mason suggested quietly, that Liv has something important she needs to tell you. Something she's been trying to say for a while now. Richard frowned at the nickname, but Jennifer's expression shifted, truly looking at her daughter, perhaps for the first time in months. In the blue neon light of the diner sign, Olivia stood a little straighter, her chin lifting slightly. Mom, she began, her voice trembling but determined. I feel like ever since you married Richard, I've been disappearing. I feel like I don't matter anymore, and I feel like no one sees who I really am. Jennifer's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Behind her, Richard's stern expression faltered. Maybe, Mason suggested, you could all go inside, get some hot chocolate, and really talk. Sometimes a neutral place makes difficult conversations easier. As the family moved toward the diner entrance, Olivia glanced back at Mason and mouthed a silent thank you. He nodded, watching as she walked through the door, her back straight and her step steady. Mason remained in the parking lot, looking up at the stars now appearing above the mountain ridges. He knew from experience that one conversation wouldn't solve everything, but it was a beginning. And sometimes beginnings were enough. 3 weeks had passed since the night at Bridger Creek Diner. Mason was loading tools into his truck after finishing a job at the Johnson property when his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Mr. Reed, it's Olivia. Mom gave me your number. Can I talk to you? I'll be at Aspen Park after school. 3:30. Mason checked his watch. 2:45. He had just enough time to clean up and make it to the small park on the edge of town. As he drove, he wondered what had prompted Olivia to reach out. Their conversation at the diner had been a beginning, but beginnings were fragile things. The park was quiet when he arrived, most kids still in school or not yet freed from after-school activities. Mason spotted Olivia immediately, sitting alone on a bench near the baseball diamond, still in her St. Catherine's uniform. "This seat taken?" he asked, approaching. Olivia looked up, relief washing over her face. "You came. Said I would, didn't I?" Mason settled onto the bench beside her. "How things been?" Olivia scuffed her shoe against the ground. "Different. Better in some ways, worse in others." "Want to walk and talk?" Mason suggested, nodding toward the trail that wound around the park's perimeter. These old knees do better moving than sitting. As they followed the path, Olivia began to unpack the last 3 weeks. The conversation at the diner had lasted hours, with tears and revelations from everyone. Her mother had been genuinely shocked to learn about the twins' behavior when adults weren't present. Richard had been defensive at first, but eventually acknowledged that he might have been favoring his own children during the transition. "They promised things would change," Olivia said, kicking at a pine cone on the path. "And they did for about a week. Mom started checking in with me more, and Richard actually punished the twins when he caught them going through my room." "But," Mason prompted, "but now it's like subtle. Sophie doesn't call me names anymore, but she gives me these looks when no one's watching. Jackson tells his friends not to talk to me at school." Olivia's voice tightened. "And last night, I heard Mom and Richard arguing. He said she was favoring me to compensate, and that she needed to maintain consistent discipline across the board." They reached a small wooden bridge that crossed the creek running through the park. Olivia stopped midway, leaning against the railing to watch the water flowing beneath them. "I tried what you said, using I feel statements, but it's like they've decided they already fixed the problem, so I must be exaggerating now." She looked up at Mason, frustration evident in her eyes. "I don't want to be a problem they have to fix. I just want to be live again." Mason leaned against the railing beside her, considering his words carefully. Change isn't a straight line, especially when it comes to families. Everyone takes steps forward, then back, then sideways for a while. "So what am I supposed to do? Just wait and hope it gets better?" "Not exactly," Mason said. "Remember what I told you about aspens? They're connected underground. When one tree struggles, the others send it nutrients and support through their shared root system." Olivia frowned. "But I don't have a root system." "Don't you?" Mason asked gently. "Your mom loves you, even if she's struggling to balance everything. That's a root. Your dad in Seattle, that's another. And now you've got me. Roots don't have to be perfect to provide support." A slight smile touched Olivia's lips. "I talked to Dad last weekend. Really talked. Not just the usual house school stuff. He's coming to visit next month." "That's a good start." Mason nodded. "What about at school? Any allies there?" Olivia hesitated. "There's Ms. Delaney, the art teacher. She noticed I was upset last week and let me stay in the art room during lunch. And there's this girl, Zoe. She's new too. We've been sitting together in the cafeteria." "More roots," Mason pointed out. "And what about your own passions? The things that make you feel like you?" Olivia's expression brightened slightly. "I joined a photography club. Mom used to do photography before she got busy with work and dating Richard. When I told her I signed up, she actually dug out her old camera for me to use." Mason smiled. "That's not nothing." Below them, the creek water flowed around rocks and fallen branches, finding new paths when old ones were blocked. Olivia watched it thoughtfully. "I still don't know how to make the twins stop being awful when adults aren't around," she admitted. "Sometimes you can't change others," Mason said, "but you can get strong enough that their behavior doesn't define you." He straightened up from the railing. Which reminds me, how would you feel about learning some basic forestry skills? The Conservation Corps has a youth program starting next weekend. Gets you outdoors, teaches useful skills, looks good on college applications. With other kids? Olivia asked, looking uncertain. With other kids who might not fit in elsewhere, Mason clarified. Kids who find themselves in the woods. Olivia considered this, watching as a leaf spiraled down from an overhanging tree and landed on the water surface, beginning its journey downstream. I think, she said slowly, I'd like that. The early December air was crisp and cold as Mason's truck bounced along the Forest Service road. Beside him, Olivia was bundled in a new forest green jacket, a birthday gift from her mother and, surprisingly, Richard. In the back seat, camera equipment jostled in a padded bag, another birthday surprise, this one from her father during his visit the previous month. You sure you want to hike all the way up today? Mason asked, glancing at the gathering clouds. Weather report says snow by afternoon. Olivia nodded determinedly. I need to get winter shots for my photography project. Ms. Delaney says seasonal transitions make the most compelling visual narratives. Well, your art teacher isn't wrong. Mason chuckled. Just stay close. Weather changes fast up here. It had been almost 3 months since their first encounter in the Aspen Grove. In that time, a tentative mentorship had formed, with Olivia's mother's cautious blessing. The Conservation Corps program had been a turning point, giving Olivia confidence, outdoor skills, and most importantly, friends outside of school and her complicated home life. The home situation itself remained a work in progress. Some days were better than others. Richard was trying, in his awkward, rigid way. The twins remained challenging, but with her growing support network, Olivia was finding her footing. They parked at the trailhead and began the hike up to the Aspen Grove. Olivia moved with growing confidence through the forest, pointing out features Mason had taught her to recognize. Bark patterns that indicated disease, tracks in the light dusting of snow, the subtle signs of wildlife preparing for deep winter. The photography club is displaying our work at the Winter Arts Festival, Olivia said as they climbed. Mom seemed really excited about it. She even got Richard to rearrange a business dinner so they could attend. That's something, Mason replied. Baby steps. When they reached the Aspen Grove, Olivia immediately went to work, adjusting her camera settings to capture the contrast between white bark and the steel-gray sky. Mason hung back, letting her work independently as he'd learned to do during their previous outings. After about 20 minutes, Olivia lowered her camera and turned to him. Can we go see it? Mason nodded, knowing exactly what she meant. Together, they walked deeper into the grove, to the special aspen, where he had carved her name months ago. The tree stood as it had before, though now bare of leaves, its branches etched against the winter sky like delicate brushstrokes. Olivia approached it slowly, brushing fresh snow from the bark to reveal the carved letters. The edges of the carving had darkened slightly, the tree's natural healing process beginning its work, but the name remained clear, L.I.V. It's still here, she said softly. Told you it would be, Mason replied, hanging back to give her this moment. Olivia took several photographs of the carving from different angles, then stepped back to capture the entire tree. As she worked, Mason noticed something he hadn't before, small carvings on nearby aspens, faint with age but still visible, initials, dates, hearts, and names going back decades. You see all these? He asked, gesturing around them. People have been coming to this grove for generations, leaving little pieces of themselves behind. Olivia lowered her camera, looking around with new awareness. It's like a community through time. Exactly, Mason nodded. Each person who carved their name here felt something special about this place, just like you did. Snowflakes began to drift down, landing softly on Olivia's dark hair and the shoulders of her green jacket. She tilted her face upward, letting the flakes land on her cheeks and eyelashes. Mom and I had a real talk last night, she said suddenly, after Sophie made a comment about my photos being basic. Instead of ignoring it, Mom actually called her out and told her to apologize. Mason raised his eyebrows. That's progress. Yeah, Olivia agreed. And later, when we were alone, Mom told me she was proud of how I've handled everything. She said, Olivia's voice caught slightly. She said Dad would have handled the divorce and remarriage a lot worse at my age. The snow was falling more steadily now, transforming the grove into a quiet, white sanctuary. Olivia raised her camera again, capturing the snowflakes as they settled on the carved letters of her name. I think, she said thoughtfully, I'm going to show these photos at the festival. Not just the scenic ones, but this. She gestured to the carved name. My whole story. That's brave, Mason observed. Olivia smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. I learned from someone that standing your ground sometimes means owning your story. As they prepared to head back down the mountain, with the snow falling more heavily around them, Olivia took one last photograph, a wide shot of the grove, with Mason standing among the white trunks, his figure small but solid against the vastness of the forest. You know what Miss Delaney said when I told her about finding my voice again? Olivia asked as they started down the trail. She said sometimes we need someone outside our usual world to remind us who we really are. Someone who sees us clearly because they have no reason not to. Mason adjusted his hat against the falling snow. Smart lady, your art teacher. Yeah, Olivia agreed, carefully stowing her camera in its bag. But I think it takes one to know one. Above them, the aspen grove stood silent and steady, bearing witness to their departing figures, the tall, weathered man and the young girl walking beside him, no longer lost, no longer crying, but finding her way through the woods and beyond.